Levin, and welcome to another edition of Cop Talk. I'm here with Editor-in-Chief Emeritus Bob Cohn, the esteemed Bob Cohn, and our producer, Aggie Gallagher. Let's get to it, Bob.
Absolutely.
You interviewed Gil Hoffman of the Jerusalem Post this weekend, who was visiting St. Louis.
Terrific guy.
What struck you most poignantly about your conversations with him about the current political situation in the Middle East?
Well, you know, I didn't want to throw him a curve because his specialty is political analysis for the Jerusalem Post. But I started off by asking him what the significance is of the downfall of Tzipi Livni, who was ousted as the leader of the Kadima party by Shaul Mofaz, the former Israel Defense Forces chief of staff. And he said it actually is a good thing, a positive thing, because it will make it more likely that the next government of Israel, that Bibi Netanyahu, will be able to form a coalition with Kadima. That Tzipi Livni adamantly refused. Remember, she said she didn't want to be a fig leaf for Netanyahu's policies. And that was, her colleagues felt that was personal pique, and that it tied Netanyahu's hands. There's also an expectation that Avigdor Lieberman, the foreign minister, might be indicted fairly soon. And this will give Netanyahu the opportunity to broaden his coalition. And if things do come together in terms of a revival of the peace process, this will make it more likely to happen.
Speaking of, let's stay with the Middle East, what's going to happen now with Syria? We have a disastrous situation. It is not getting a whole lot better.
It really isn't getting any better. The ceasefire, quote unquote, that Kofi Annan attempted to negotiate is failing. What worries me is that I don't see any kind of stomach on the part of any of the Western powers, including the United States, the NATO powers. And by the way, Gil Hoffman referred to the upcoming elections and all these Sarkozy's in a dead heat for his effort to be reelected. And he had been very aggressive in terms of the Libyan situation. I don't see that happening, any kind of major military intervention. And then diplomatically, the Russians and the Chinese have vetoed it. But I think to continue the status quo where these poor people are just being mowed down in the streets is really unacceptable. But quite honestly, I don't see what the immediate solution to the problem is.
Now, it's probably even terrible to talk about finding a silver lining in a terrible situation. But when you look at what's going on with Iran, Syria certainly was one of their main proxies in the Middle East, and it's doubtful that they could be particularly effective on that front if something happens between Israel and Iran.
Exactly. It also pulls the pins out from under Hezbollah in Lebanon. They were the chief backer, along with Iran, of Hezbollah. And so certainly from a geopolitical Israel-centered point of view, the downfall of that regime under any circumstances would be good. By the way, he also surprised me by saying I thought the Muslim Brotherhood would be the most likely successor to Bashar Assad. He felt they were a highly secularized society, and it is just as likely that there could be a Sunni secular regime replacing Assad. And that's
let's move to the national level here with Congressman Paul Ryan's proposed federal budget, which would eviscerate benefits severely. So in Missouri, for example, those receiving food stamps and welfare would be left at roughly half the federal poverty level. So basically the federal poverty level for a family of three, 18,000, those folks would be left at 9,000 a year, not hardly the kind of revenue for a family that would encourage, as Paul Ryan suggests, dependence on government money. What do you think about that?
First there were attacks on Medicare and Medicaid, and now there's even an attack on the basic principles of the New Deal and of Social Security and the safety net, really. It became a cliche, but we can no longer take for granted that it will stay in place because of radical proposals by the Ryan budget. I guess charitably you could say he's throwing down a marker saying, well, here's a concrete budget that the Republicans can get it back of. I think Mitt Romney has signed off on it as a good document, but it's certainly a non-starter in terms of the increased poverty rolls that this would result.
And what's so interesting to me is we look at the disaster that's going on in Europe, and one of the reasons, there are certainly a variety, but one of the reasons is the severe austerity chomp on governmental budgets, in Spain, in Greece, in other countries, which is causing the recession to, double, triple out of control. And yet, Ryan and his supporters believe that the same approach is going to help the federal budget and the economy in the United States. Now we have another example of legislative bashing in the Missouri General Assembly as a bill was introduced and sent to committee that would preclude school districts from teaching about or taking any action regarding bullying based on sexual identity. What do you make of all this?
If I had any hairs remaining on my scalp, they would be being ripped. I mean, I can't even imagine anything so egregious in terms of limiting the free speech rights of school districts to even discuss issues of gender. These guys know that these things are unconstitutional. They know that they are discriminatory, and they deliberately introduce them, even knowing that they will probably be overturned by the courts, as they should be.
And those who are proposing these bills, and we talk about this in our editorial this week, are really setting forth a real choice. If you believe in cutting back the rights of minorities, minority voters, immigrants, LGBT folks, and women's reproductive rights, then you'll support the majority who's kind of espousing the party line against this. But it's really tragic that we're creating this us versus them kind of sentiment in Missouri, and it's really, I think it's setting a very bad example and name for the state.
There's a real threat to our whole democratic sense of values.
Yeah.
To single out a particular cohort of the population for official discrimination.
And we saw last year, we saw the legislature with these so-called anti-Sharia laws,
Yes.
Seeking to create a perception and an issue with respect to the Muslim population. Heaven only knows when there will be something that's targeted at the Jewish population.
Yeah,
That's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Cop Talk. On behalf of Bob and Aggie, so long.